It's Amir here.
And it's Azhar.
I hope you guys are doing well. Today we're going to have two separate segments in the show where you can have a chance to answer your questions. So if you're watching today live, please put your questions straight into the chat right now, and we'll try and answer as many of them as possible. But before that, we've got Andy. Hey, Andy, nice to meet you. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, really good, actually. Really, really good.
All good.
Good. Cheers for having me on.
No worries
No
at
worries.
all. So, awesome. What I'm just going to do in just a second is get up your CV. But is there anything specific? Like what are your goals, what are your aims? What do you want to kind of get into? And where are you at right now?
So I'm sort of interested in asset management, equity research, that sort of area. And at the moment, I've got an internship coming up this summer with a fintech in risk. And my goal is to sort of get on a graduate scheme or potentially do a master's and apply for internships again next year and then a grad scheme after that. So I'm sort of torn between doing a master's and getting an internship next year or going straight for a grad scheme this year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Sort of my
awesome.
lack of relevant work experience in the asset management area.
So, just quickly, what kind of firms are you looking at here? Like kind of like your kind of Black Rocks. Is that what we're talking about? Or like
Yeah, that's what.
Okay, awesome, cool. So I just give everyone a little bit of time to kind of absorb the first page of the CV. Azhar, do you want to jump straight in with some of your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing is, Andy, you've got quite a good amount of work experience here. So well played already. I think you would differentiate yourself at that level. So you've done that quite well here. There are a few things I would change structurally with the CV personally.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally would reduce the profile itself. I might get rid of the profile.
Okay.
And take some of the content that you've got there and put it throughout the rest of the CV, just so you can
4%,
relate with it. Yeah, so particularly the top 4% in corporate finance module, I want to know that if I was your employer. So I would definitely put that under your, your relevant modules, for example, to showcase that. Yeah, so that's the first thing that I would do. So that in and of itself will shorten the CV. The second thing that I would do, just from a purely a formatting perspective, is I'd have more spacing between each of your different experiences. Just so, just because when you have a lot of text all in one go, it can be quite difficult to take in, or they might not read all of it. So that spacing is going to be really good for the readability of the CV. And it will also be easier because now you've got rid of your profile, you don't have to cram everything on because of you're worried about the amount of words on the page.
Yeah. So just going to add to that a little bit. Some stuff you may have heard before. Some of these seem really, really good. I want a bit of them quantified to some degree. So I want to know, to what degree you had impact and how, some degree of numbers, not necessarily overusing those numbers, but kind of including them. And the second thing, and this is a really important concept, which I haven't really touched on before, is there are two main kinds of experiences that I talk about. And let me break these down. The first kind is your classic your internships at a firm, for example. So your KPMG data analytics virtual internship is something which you went on a structured program, you did it. Your second thing is your project you've done. So for example, the second, the coronavirus student response network, it goes into your second group of things. Now, you want a bit of both, but the one where you can really show how different you are is in that second group, because you took real ownership and you did something and you actually genuinely had the opportunity to change something. Chances are you didn't change how KPMG is going to do their corporate strategy in the future, but you may have really changed how the student network responded. Or for example, you might have really changed if you're part of a club or something. So what is really, really powerful is if you take those second group of experiences, talk about them and really explain how you single-handedly and the personal impact that you had was huge. So what I want to know here is not just you executed these team working skills. What I want to know is what impact did you specifically have on that strategy? How did it change? How much money did you raise? What was the unique, for example, you might say that it was the fact that you suggested, going in a modular, I don't know, I'm making it up, right? But you suggested, I'm going to go in a modular form. I'm going to go in, we're going to have 4 different, response units for different areas. And that was your idea. And that's how you were able to increase the efficacy by 20%. So I want to know a little bit about what you did and the number that created that. And That I can really believe. I can really believe that you as an individual had that impact, which is why it's going to be so powerful.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. The additional thing that I would add to that is one of the worries with a lot of these virtual internships is, you probably don't know how much revenue you raised as a result of taking a certain action. And like, you can't just email the company and be like, hey, by the way, this piece of work I did, like, how much did that raise, right? You can't do that.
Yeah.
So until you have those summers, I think it's really important that you do also focus heavily on the projects that you've done, like with the coronavirus student response team, as Amir mentioned. So some like very like practical work that you can do is specifically when you talk about, yourself generating business partnerships, tell me like how many business partnerships you made, what kind of size of the firms or the organizations you partnered with were. Like if you received any kind of sponsorship, what were like the sponsorship amounts that you received? When you talk about, again, when you're like innovative, creating entrepreneurial solutions to drive growth, tell me how much you increase membership by, like a percentage wise, or how much you increase like engagement within the society in terms of how many people attended meetings, for example. This is a key thing for everyone, by the way, is whenever you try, you always want to make your actions do the talking for you. So don't tell me that you created strategies to drive growth. Tell me, what did those growth driving strategies, what were the outcome of that, right? So just always constantly focusing on the value element. And the last thing I do, this is a personal thing, is particularly again with like your pestos restaurants at the bottom, you want to make sure it's not vague at all. So in terms of talk about like how quickly like your order rate or like your order fulfillment rate, like in terms of how like your serving abilities, for example, or like in terms of your delegation, like how were you able to manage those shifts and like some kind of quantification of that, so it isn't just like a line explaining like the basic function.
Or perhaps if there was a change that you implemented, maybe there was old leadership and there was your leadership, and upon taking the role but implemented this plan or this new strategy of communication, or one where you had like a little meeting, like a 10-minute brief before every time, and that led to that specific increase, because that kind of gives you some insight into the way that you think, and then the result that also happened as a result of that.
Okay, cheers.
We've got about 2 minutes left. Is there any kind of questions that you had, anything that you weren't too sure about on your CV, stuff you're like, oh, I don't know if I agree with you guys there?
Just sort of a bit of advice regarding the sort of situation we're at now. Would you recommend to sort of just apply for grad schemes with non-relevant like internship experience, going to this sort of feed, or to sort of apply for a master's to sort of defer the whole process by a year and apply to stuff again, internships again this summer or next summer?
Okay, good question. So when you say what kind of roles, so you said you're looking for like asset management roles very roughly, right?
It's just like, for example, I know a lot of the internships sort of feed directly into the grad schemes. So would you recommend to apply for internships again, sort of this recruiting season, and then do a master's for the pure sake of being able to apply for internships again, or just apply for grad schemes with a lack of relevant sort of internship experience?
So this depends entirely on where you're applying. So for example, if you're applying to be a consultant, that would not be the relevant strategy, because A, most of them hire grads anyway, and B, they don't hire penultimate years if you're doing a master at a different uni, like unless it's an integrated master's. So it wouldn't apply there. However, if applying to IBD, for example, that would really work, because a lot of them do take people from their summer programs. So you need to prioritize what it is that you really care about and find out how that specific industry works, because each microcosm is a little bit different.
Oh, okay. All right, cheers. Thanks for your help.
Right, awesome.
Yeah, perfect. Like, let us know how those changes go, and like, glad it
All
helped.
right, cheers. Thanks.
All right, mate. I hope you have a good one. Yeah.
I do. Bye.
All right, awesome. So at this point in time, we're going to have a little Q&A session. So if you've got some questions you're watching right now, plop them in the chat, and we'll be able to answer some of them as we go along. So, right, awesome. Hannah M asks, hey, thanks so much for your time management tips last week. identifying where I was wasting time and changing that allowed me to have the most productive week in months. Azhar, do you have? Thank you, Hannah, for that. I was really happy that
I love that.
you kind of had that that ability. Azhar, do you have any additional tips for kind of time management stuff that you would do? You would add on top of the what we said prior to this?
Time management. Okay, so a couple of them actually. So the biggest like killer of time management is procrastination. So this is quite an interesting one. I'd say basically make sure that all of the work that you're doing feeds into a much larger goal. So it's never just I am revising, for example, this particular topic. It's I am trying to get the A star in this particular subject. And as a result, all of these actions that are components underneath that feed into that, right? That way, you're much less likely to procrastinate because at the end of the day, you know that if you haven't worked on that particular component, today's work, today's revision, you know that in the long run, you're compromising your ability to meet that big goal that you really care about. So it makes every single day important and it gives that value, right? Additionally, if you are like, you know what, I really want to get a top internship this summer, and you figured out, I'm going to apply to, 60 different places to really guarantee that. And today you have to apply to 2 or 3. You know that you can't put that off because if you put those 2 places off, at the end of that time that you may not have that top internship because you didn't meet your target, right? So it's about giving value to what you're working on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome, love that, Azhar. We had a few more questions. I will go through them in this next 10-minute segment. Joe has asked, do you recommend any books, podcasts, or channels specifically for productivity?
Oh, specifically for productivity.
So I can kind of go on a few here. So in terms of productivity, I think depends what kind of things you want to achieve because there's general productivity, right? And there's productivity within the specific sphere you want to. So if I want to get business productivity, for example, like the books I love is like Traction, How to Get a Grip on Your Business, really helps with a lot of that. If you want to know, for example, how to maybe adjust your digital marketing, for example, They Ask You Answer is a fantastic book. So the first thing you have to do is ask, what is the specific knowledge you want to gain to improve your efficacy within a specific area? Then there's also another component, like mindset. How do you make sure you're consistent with the effort you're putting in, right? Because being productive is useful, but how can you make sure you're consistently doing it? For me, the book called Think and Grow Rich is amazing. This kind of persistent mindset. So how can you keep on waking up and doing what you love doing? And then in terms of time management, is there anything you have, or in terms of productivity there, anything else specific you have there, Azhar?
I do actually have a counter tip, right? So recently, one thing that we've seen is on YouTube, you get these channels which are like study with me's, and you get a ton of people, studying along with the YouTuber as they go along, right? And what I'd actually suggest is one of the best ways to become really productive is to get one of your friends to go along with you along that journey. So often, like, we'll trick ourselves, right? We'll fool ourselves and when we think we're working or not working, but we will definitely call out our friends because we want the best for them. So if you find someone who has a similar goal to you, who needs to work a similar amount to you, and you both work at the same time together, I think that's something really, really powerful. This is something I actually use with one of my friends. So we both get on a Zoom, we do separate work, we mute ourselves, and we agree only to have breaks in like 2-3 hours time, at which point we double check and make sure we've kept on working. So that's definitely something I would recommend. And separate to that, as Amir mentioned before, right? There's your general productivity, which is like the mindset for it. And then there's finding people who have done something that you want to do within your field, who've done it really well and who've demonstrated that. And in that scenario, you want to follow those individuals, and that in and of itself, you get some really good tips to really speed up that process.
Awesome. There's a few other questions. I'm going to pick up a question from Isa. This is a really interesting question. Do you have any advice in overcoming unseen barriers to entry, i.e. discrimination and bias, specifically referring to the civil service fast stream where 88% of employees are white? I actually have a really interesting take here personally. Or at least I think so. I think there are two ways to view bias. I think if you're a minority or you're someone who kind of feels that obviously look at statistics, there's likely to be some degree of bias. Two different viewpoints. One is that these things exist and it's important to acknowledge them and know that, so we as a society can be tackling them. The second thing, however, is I think you cannot internalize and should not internalize the bias, because it's one of these things where the more aware of it you become, the more it affects you personally, the more you feel it. And if you feel it in the moment that you think people are looking at you or you think you feel out of place, you'll behave almost as if you are more and more. So it's one of these things where I think you've got to compartmentalize and think to yourself, know that it exists, but really assume that kind of when you behave as if it doesn't exist, and when you live your everyday day to day, because if you think and you let it affect you and you let it, you let it get into you, or you think that the things you've done have been in spite of those, then I think that can be damaging. Especially because even though there are biases, if you are good enough, you can get ahead of it. And the mindset you've got to have is like, I'm going to be so good that no matter these biases that may exist, I'm going to get ahead of that anyway. And that's what I'd personally go for.
And is that specifically, Amir, for applying to those kind of roles?
So I think it says barriers to entry, but I think his application is also promotion as well as a different topic.
I see, yeah. So two takes on that. In terms of promotion, like if you ever feel that you are, so this is actually like a quick tip on how to get promoted. So you want to be so good that they can't deny you a promotion essentially in any single scenario. So one reason why people end up in middle management for their entire lives, not saying there's anything wrong with that, but the reason why it happens is because there is no objective metric by which they would need to get promoted. So it's really, really important to have those discussions with your manager to be like, if I achieve this level of attainment, I'm clearly exceeding. And therefore, in 6 months or 12 months, you can put forward a very strong promotion case saying that you've exceeded your targets. Whereas if you don't have specific targets that you can prove you exceeded by, then everything becomes subjective and it's much harder, therefore, to get promoted. So I'd recommend, irrespective of anything or those kind of barriers within an organization, the moment you have those conversations, you can easily prove yourself and get ahead if you are the best candidate. Yeah. Oh, have we lost you, Amir?
Nope, I'm still here. My internet's a bit dodgy, unfortunately, because of BT. I think we're gonna get I don't know who's next, but are they in the lobby? We'll come back to these questions in just a second, guys. So no need to worry. We've got another Q&A segment coming on later on as well.
So we've got just 1 minute before I think Kofo comes on.
Okay, great. I think very quickly, I think Junior's asked a question. Do employers reflect on hobbies within a CV?
So in my opinion, yes. I think it reflects more actually when you get around to the actual interview process. Because in my opinion, I think that a lot of times I've seen people's interests and hobbies become really good points of conversation within the actual interview process itself. They look at the CV and near the end, it's like a bit of bantering around and be like, oh, tell me a bit more about that. But I think it's less important in terms of defining whether or not you get through in the initial CV screening process, is my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. It's less in the process, but when you get to actually being an interview, 100%, your personality matters so much. Like if I want to be stuck in a room with you for up to 10 hours, I want to know that I actually like speaking with you and I like you as a person. So that's why that is so fundamental. So hobbies, yes. In a CV, no.
Yeah. So we're just waiting on Kofo to join now.
Is she in the lobby or is she just coming in?
No, so I haven't seen her in the lobby yet. Do you want a quick message?
I'll send a quick
Yeah.
message.
Just following up on what Amir just mentioned in regards to the interests. I think how likability is incredibly underrated at the final stage. One of the biggest determinants is, do I like this person and do I want to spend time with this person? And that's how really employees differentiate between two people on the exact same level. And Kofo is now here. So I'll just admit her. Great question, by the way, Junior.
Hello.
Hey, Kofo, can you hear us?
Hello. Yes, that works.
How are you doing? We can't see you, by the way.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
No worries.
1 second.
Yep, take your time.
I re-downloaded it today and I don't know what's going on.
No worries. If you just click on start video and then it should start working.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, everyone, if you want to put more of your questions in the comments, and we'll come back to those. Any luck, Kofo?
1 minute. I'm just gonna exit and come back. I'm just gonna leave the app, but I shouldn't need the call.
If it's a big deal, it doesn't matter. We can just ask the question here.
Yeah, we'll just go on without it if you're unsure.
Okay, I think this should work now.
Yeah.
There we
We can see.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's jump straight into it, Amir.
So, Kofo, what was the question you wanted to ask? The topic we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so I think with CVs, I've heard like conflicting sort of advice. So what would your opinion be on 1-page or 2-page CVs when you're applying for, let's say, like first year undergrad opportunities?
Before we answer, I'm really curious to hear what you've heard specifically about 2-page CVs.
Yeah. So I think the consensus of what I've been told is at this stage, keep it 1 page. But I've also heard that it probably depends on the sector you're going into. So I'm thinking mainly of law and perhaps like a bit of government, but I don't really know what the consensus of that, because I went to a Zoom call with a barrister recently, and showing his CV, it was probably about 4 pages, but I guess that's with experience. So I don't know what would be expected of someone like a first year law student. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a fab question. I think in terms of generally, what I would say is that I would keep it generally to a page, and what I try and increase is your value density. So what I mean by that is in each line, how much you really adding there. Is there stuff that you kind of take out that isn't that useful? Maximizing that value density is incredibly important, because the time that somebody spends reading over it, they'll often skim over bits of it. And if it seems really good, they'll look into more detail. Often when I get CVs, I have a general look. I'll read the first 2 things in detail. And if I love it, I'm like, oh, this person seems really good. I'll read more of it. If the first couple of things don't seem that good, I'm going to skip past it. So you want that value density to be as high as possible, which is generally why you'd recommend one page. It's not like your 2 pages are going to get thrown out. That's not the case. They'll always give it a go and they'll always look through it. It's just they'll start giving a lot quicker.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's like one of the big issues I see with 2-page CVs is a lot of people just haven't got enough to say within those 2 pages. So having 2 pages for the sake of 2 pages is really bad. I've had individuals, who've had 3 or 4 summer internships, and even then, they've got it all on 1 page. And it's all about having every single line being, how did I add value? Like, I did this activity and this is how I added value. One of the big worries and big no-nos to identify that your CV is too long is when you start reading some of the bullet points and you realize they're more descriptive than they are, quantifiable or how you added value. And it's more talking about the role you did. So that's like a quick way to understand.
Thank you.
I know you wanted to go into law and education policy. So, and you also had questions on networking. So is there anything you want to talk about there?
Oh, yes. So online networking, I think it's still difficult for me because you don't want to be insensitive, because obviously there's a lot going on right now, both with the global situation and just people working from home in time. So how would you advise actually building like serious professional relationships during this time? Or would you say just wait until everything's sort of more normal to do that?
Yeah, so two big tips here, and these aren't the ones I normally give. The first is, so sometimes I say message people LinkedIn, message people this, that. One big thing is you forget that your peers of today are the leaders of the future. So, and they have a lot more time. They're like you, they're sitting around at home. If you're someone who wants to go into law and you aspire, send Kofa, put your ID, send her a message right now, and you guys link up and have a chat to get to know each other, become genuine relationships. When you go into the wider world, someone's like, oh my gosh, I need a lawyer. Okay, let me call up Kofa. I don't know what to do. They will call you up, and that will massively help you in the future. Second thing, if you've got senior colleagues right now that you don't want to message them, and I've made a link to post about this. Ask them for an interview of their time. Don't ask them for help. Ask them, oh, I love your story. I love what you've done here. I want to cover you. You seem so amazing. People love to hear about themselves. Ask to interview them genuinely and be really interested in their story. And they'll be invested in you as well, because you love what they do. So those are my two big pieces of advice for networking in these kind of times.
Thank you.
Yeah, those really work, by the way, especially the interview one. It caught me out a few times as well. The last piece of advice I'd give you is follow content creators who create content that you are really looking forward to and really wanting to understand. A shout out to one of my friends, Harry Clark, puts out some of the best content on commercial law on LinkedIn. I definitely follow him. Even by just looking through all of his content and his commercial awareness guide, you'll be ahead of a lot of the other people who are at the same stage as you are. Additionally, you don't need to send random messages necessarily to loads of senior people, but if you just start commenting your own thoughts on a lot of their different posts and stuff, you're going to get them to start interacting with you. So down the line, if you do drop them a message, they're much more likely to interact with you as well and give you value.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely true. I think I do underestimate people my age group. So not underestimate, but because I don't look up to them, I sometimes don't think about them when you need a bit of help or advice.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny now, right? Because I think back to some of by the way, me and Amir went to school together, primary and secondary. But I look back to some of the people I was friends with in secondary school, even primary school, and they're really senior, software engineers now. They're lawyers, bankers, consultants, people in top industries doing incredible things. But you wouldn't think that when you're sat right next to them, right?
No.
So I think you know that this person doesn't really have their stuff together, but at the same time, you all grow together and you all become really, really important to each other. So definitely don't underestimate that.
That's true. Thank you.
Awesome. We've got about a minute left. Is anything you want to ask? Anything you want to add?
Oh, there was one random question I had about color on CVs. Yes, no, perhaps. Again, I've heard conflicting advice, but personally, I think it's nice to have a bit of color, but you don't want to seem too unprofessional. And when I mean color, probably just when you have headings, just that bit in a color.
Potentially. I wouldn't make it seem too exuberant. The exception is if you're applying to startups or you're a marketing student or you are a computer science student, you're allowed to be a bit more kind of out there a little bit. Apart from that, I would say generally, I would personally stick to black and white. As long as it's not too hard in the eyes, it'll be fine. So yeah, as long as it stick out, then it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Completely agree with that. Thank you so much for coming on. I think we had some really good discussion. So have a great day.
And
awesome,
you too. Thank you.
Bye.
We have got Natasha waiting.
By the way, I think you just awesome. Just send Sophia the link in a little bit because she's commented.
Oh, hi. Yeah. I have my green screen.
Hey, Natasha.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Really good, really good. I love your background, by the way.
It's from my internship because we're hosting workshops, so we all keep the logo on the back. I'll just remove it. Okay, yeah.
No, it's all good.
First of all, thank you so much for all your work. I've been following you since the beginning, and all your LinkedIn posts and your advice is so helpful.
Oh, thank you. That genuinely does mean a lot to us. This is why we do what we do. So yeah, really appreciate that on both our parts. So how can we help you today, Natasha?
So I have a few quick questions about my resume, analytical skills. So I'm a second-year university student, and I'm studying a humanities social science discipline. And I'm interested in management consulting. And I think the biggest problem that I'm facing right now is that I can't really demonstrate a strong analytical skill set. So I was wondering if you had advice on how to build that and how to show that on my resume.
So two quick questions. The first is, in terms of what kind of firms are you aiming for roughly?
The big three, so Bain, McKinsey, BCG, Oliver Wyman, big four as well.
Okay, great. And second question is, when you say analytical skills, just illustrate that with some examples.
So we don't have very hard math or coding classes in university, for example. Or I don't really know how to, so I don't know how to code, and I don't have any sort of project where I've really showcased that yet.
So when you say the word analytical skills, what you said to me is like hard data skills, not specifically analytical skills. So the kind of skills that you want to be talking about is not really what management consulting is looking for, because they know a lot of people are not going to have the Excel skills because they don't teach you that at university, and they're very aware of that fact. So what they actually are looking for is very hard leadership skills. So they want to know, and this is really key, that you can hold the presence in a room, that you have the ability to take control. Because think about it, you're a consultant coming into a situation, no one knows what the hell's going on. And that's why you're called in the first place. So you need to be able to take a situation where you are at this great uncertainty, no one knows what's going on. And you need to be able to synthesize what's currently been happening and add to that. So leadership is incredibly important. You know, if there's any club societies you've been running at university, that's really, really key. But you don't need programming skills. In fact, if they did that, they'd require computer science or STEM degrees, and they don't. That's not the case.
Okay.
Yeah. So to add on to that, don't worry at all about being rejected for not having programming skills. That wouldn't fall under what they're looking for in terms of analytical.
Okay.
The other question I'd ask is, are you involved heavily by any chance in like any of the like different like any university societies at all?
So I'm the president of the debate club at university. And other than that, I'm a research assistant for a few professors, and I'm a teaching assistant.
Okay, so go on, Amir.
You go on. I'm just gonna. You go on. You on.
Okay, so a couple of things. I think your leadership experience as part of the debate club is going to be really, really powerful. Genuinely, like I think that's one of your biggest selling points. Because particularly at interview, you can talk, about you have great credibility to, your ability to summarize and synthesize and all of that. Additionally, you have very significant responsibilities as the president. So talk about, how you increase like the membership of the society, talk about like the different events that you've ran and how successful those events were using like numbers to quantify that. And yeah, Amir, anything to add?
Yeah, debate specifically is an amazing thing to do for consulting. A lot of very successful debate, because I did debate in high school as well. I did a lot of it. It's an extremely, extremely good thing for consulting. Primarily because of the excellent communication skills you develop, and the ability to be able to speak publicly is super important, because half of your job is not just creating the strategy, but communicating that strategy. That's so key. So that's really, really going to help you. Other stuff is stuff like if you were ever, the president, maybe university newspaper editor, all that kind of stuff. President debate really helps. Anything to do with entrepreneurship is also super useful. All that kind of stuff in terms of consulting really puts you like ahead of the game in terms of your CV specifically.
Okay.
So go on. So yeah.
Go ahead. I
was going to ask at this point, if you might have more consulting questions, or you can look through your CV specifically if that's what we want to get into.
Yeah. So could I share screen and show you my CV?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Sorry.
I think it is interesting though, Amir, that there are a lot of misconceptions about what is required for the different industries.
So the reason why I asked that is because I spoke to a recruiter from BCG, and she said that you're a media student, so even if you have a high GPA, you still really can't showcase a strong analytical skill set. And at that time, I just took it to mean like math and coding.
All right.
Yeah, my guess was she wasn't talking about the coding itself, but rather the kind of skills you'd pick up, as a consultant. So if you're talking about BCG Gamma, like their data consulting, then you'd be right. Like if it was specifically, or for example, Quantum Black, which is like McKinsey's like data like subsidiary that they purchased, in that case you'd be 100% right. Whereas if it's more analytical skills, kind of like the projects you've done, kind of, if it's any other kind of, maybe you just like did case clubs, consulting, anything like that, maybe anything where you had to kind of have a bunch of data and you analyzed it, like you didn't use programming, you didn't use R, you just used maybe Excel, or you just on PowerPoint or something. Those are the kind of skills that they may be kind of looking for when it comes to where they use the phrase analytical. So it's not hard skills, more like taking a bunch of data and coming up with conclusions and syntheses based upon that.
Okay, so perfect. We've got your CV up. So I actually have quite a lot to say here. The first thing oh no, don't be worried. The first thing I'd say is you have a lot of different really cool experiences. Having looked through your CV, I think like it's all about showcasing them though, and really like throwing in the face of the reviewer and being like, I'm really good at this. So first thing is your GPA is really high. So I would definitely mention that, and mention like what percentage of your cohort you're in, like maybe like top 2% of, I don't know, like 150 students, for example, something like that. Additionally, I probably wouldn't, just from like a formatting perspective, keep the YouTube link within the CV, just because I think it can be slightly unprofessional sometimes. I would maybe also move your, I would have your work experience first and have your awards more towards your awards that are not directly relevant to your course at the bottom of the CV.
Okay.
From like a formatting perspective, I think that I definitely add bullet points for all of the different points underneath each of your relevant work experiences. Amir, anything to add?
Yeah, just in terms of formatting, I think look up a good template online and kind of take some stuff from there. There are inconsistencies. So if you look at work experience as a heading and leadership, they should in theory be the same, but they've been formatted differently. So a couple of points there. Essentially, I think if I was to synthesize your CV, it's you have amazing experiences and you are selling yourself short in what you are saying. For example, you increase club membership by 400% within one semester. That's phenomenal. That's really, really impressive. I want to know more about how you did that and the plan you had. Add some bullet points in there. Talk to me about, maybe it could still be one line. It can be, you created a new strategy using digital marketing and on-campus recruiting, which led to a 400 piece. But right
that sounds
now, that's just by
oh, and then you're cutting out slightly. Yep, you're cutting out slightly.
You see how you've sprinkled a little bit of detail in there, and that detail makes it so much more believable. You can say something like you increase club membership through digital on-campus recruiting, which led to a club membership increase of 400%. You add a little bit of detail in there, it makes it really believable. Additionally, as a gone, yeah, you go.
Yeah. Additionally, like it's about having the right experience under the right heading. So you have quite a lot of different awards that you have won here that I would put under a single awards and achievements section, for example, at the bottom. And more focus on, like the specific strategies that you did as Debate Society president in order to really achieve those positive outcomes. For example, particularly again, in regards to some of your work under American School of Doha as well. I would do the exact same thing where I would separate out your bullet points effectively. So there you've got like a couple of points like written in like paragraph form. So I would make them all individual bullet points and specifically talk about, you know, how the added value. So for example, you led a team of 80 plus students over the course of X period of time with this outcome. And then you talk about the outcome and like how you increased efficiency of that. So effectively like explaining your bullet points in a bit more detail with the value that you provided there as a result.
Similar with, and I changed the wording around your work experience of research assistant. When you talk about, you know, role mostly given to professors, I just changed that wording a little bit. Make it that you were the youngest reviewer ever, youngest presenter, and that kind of thing. And you presented that, you know, it's unclear to me whether that's basically what I'd say overall on that one, because it's genuinely incredibly impressive. And you come across very, very smart, but I just changed the wording around, changed the formatting, because right now you just seem like someone who's done a lot, but just isn't ready for the business world yet because of the formatting and the way it's presented, the way it's spoken, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Natasha? Because we've just thrown so much at you. I'd love to get your thoughts.
That makes a lot of sense, because even while I was writing this, I'm saying something like I increased club membership, but it doesn't really explain the story behind what I'm doing. And I wasn't really sure how to do that. So what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely. It's very difficult to tell a story in a CV, often because you're bullet pointing, but you do want to be doing a little bit of that. And I definitely agree. It's a very hard skill to get. It's kind of, you want to be adding a little bit of detail here and there to illustrate how you went about doing something or what it is that you did. And that can be incredibly, incredibly beneficial.
Thank you. I have one question as well. Is there anything that you see that I could just cut off from my resume? Because it goes on for like a page and a half.
Okay. Okay, so I don't think there's anything. Amir, could you go further? Could you go further down, Natasha? To be honest, I would maybe take some of the English as a second language stuff and put that as additional volunteering. However, like a lot of this stuff is genuinely very impressive. So my biggest piece of actual advice in terms of lowering the length of this would be realizing that it's more important that you have 3 bullet points for each work experience that are really well explained in terms of how you went about it and the outcome, than it is that you have every single thing that you did there. So I would maybe try and synthesize some of the work that you did, for example, under your environmental club president, to maybe 3 bullet points that are really well explained.
Okay.
Yeah, and
potentially a teaching assistant as well. Maybe, unless there's more to be said there, it on face value seems less impressive than other things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also be tempted, unless you can expand on it and quantify it in the way that you have in other places, for you to make that just a single line and put that down with your other volunteering, for example, because I want to see like your most impressive achievements first. And I love to see, your debate society and, your environmental club work first.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
No worries.
Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Awesome. Like, follow up if you have any questions, and have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day. Take care.
Awesome. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat right now. Azhar, just send Sophia the message for 5 minutes. She doesn't have a link.
Already done.
Oh, cool. So Em asked another question. She said, would you guys consider doing a personal Q&A so we get to know the people behind the advice? Questions like role models, future goals, all that kind of thing. Do you want to give any insight into that?
I would definitely consider doing a personal Q&A. Not just for our own egos, but I think the story of how we went from being two best friends aged 8 years old to now has had many, many different, twists and turns that we wouldn't expect. Really quick story, because we only have a few minutes. But when I was like 14, 15, I thought I wanted to be a writer for the longest time ever, and after that, I thought I wanted to be an investment banker, and after that, before that, I want to be a doctor. Like, there's loads and loads of twists and turns in the story that have led us to where we are today. So I definitely consider that.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of like kind of different role models, I think it really varies depending on who there is. But do you want to pick one of the people? I think one person for me that really, in terms of their mindset, always stands out is someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I was going to say the exact same person.
Now, not to say that he isn't a person who doesn't necessarily have flaws, but to say that he went from Austria to the US and, had a belief when everyone said he couldn't do something, when his parents telling him, you can't do this, you're not going to succeed, everything you're going to do is going to fail, to winning, becoming this bodybuilder, to trying to get into Hollywood somehow, despite that he had a funny accent, no one could understand what the hell he was saying, to becoming governor of California. Who is this random guy who no one knew who he is, and literally had some of the worst handicaps you could have? Like, if no one could understand what you're saying, how are you going to become an actor? But yet he still somehow did it and never gave up, and kind of persisted in a very intelligent way about going about doing things. And that's why for me is a really big someone I think I kind of try to have the same mindset as.
Yeah, I completely agree with Amir there. I think for me, some of the people that I look up to most are the ones that had a belief about what they can do. And in spite of all of the different circumstances and the adversity that came about them, they persisted with that vision in mind, and then they're able to achieve that, right? Because I think there's so much negativity in terms of people preventing you from believing you can do all these incredible things. And I think he was such a source of motivation for so many people. Yeah.
Absolutely. Issa has asked a follow-up question. Would love an honest opinion on this. How much more effort will I have to put in as a non-Russell Group graduate compared to a Russell Group grad when applying to top-tier firms? Any useful tip?
So I'll let you take one half of that question, Amir. The other half is I think that there are definitely some firms that will look more favorably upon those with universities from top universities, like great degrees from top universities. Do not ever though think that is going to limit you in a way within which you can't secure a top offer. I believe, like, irrespective of anyone's degree, I'm firmly of the belief that if they have shown that within their CV and showcase their ability to work on projects within which they have added significant value, whether that be, starting their own social enterprise or their own business and being able to grow that business to a certain amount of revenue, for example, I will always consider that person in a much stronger light than someone that just happened to get a degree from like Oxbridge, for example. Yeah, that's my opinion.
I think what I would say, and Issa kind of links to your previous question, never, ever, ever have a victim mentality in which that you think you're already behind the game and all you can do is barely catch up, right? Like, that in and of itself will kill you before you can even get out of the blocks, start running. I think it's incredibly, incredibly important that you know and you genuinely believe that you can go further. It might become difficult for certain firms if you're applying. Some firms are changing the way that they're operating. Some of the most successful business people in the world have gone to universities you've never even heard of, right? Because they were smart and they were skilled and they were thinking, okay, I've applied to these firms, but clearly it's not working for me. Instead, let me try a different route. Never go with the mentality that something you're doing is not going to will never work for you. The most important thing to do is like see what's working, and if it's not going your way, adjust the way you're doing it. Chances are you will have a more difficult time not being from a Russell Group, but the way that I would view that is entirely different. I would view it as, I'm not being trapped into a corporate career. Instead, I'm forced to try something else, and there's some hidden blessing here that is going to occur. And I'm not sure what it is right now, but it's going to happen. Having that kind of mindset powers you to do, trust me, powers you to do so much more. And it's easy to say that right now. It is, but it's the kind of thing that when you get yourself into, you truly do stuff that you think that if you look back in 2 years, you think someone who was there could never potentially do. And you're like, how did I get there?
Yeah. One quick thing to add before I admit Sophia is initially the amount you work may have to be harder, which I think is, expected in the sense that, you want to differentiate yourself as much as possible. But the moment that, you've got your initial internship or you've got your initial placement, at that point, the next time you apply to a really significant or top tier firm, they're judging you based on your previous experience now. So in no way are you ever going to be held back by the fact that your university is preventing you from getting a top role in a few years' time. And it's likely not even to affect you initially as well for the reasons Amir mentioned.
I mean, yeah, let me give you an example of where it can be a blessing. 10 seconds. The blessing is you go in, the big firms don't work for you. You have to go to a small firm. Because it's small, you get access to the CEO every single day. Because you want to work hard, you outperform, and he or she sees you doing that on a daily basis, and you get promoted 10 times quicker you ever would have done in that small firm. There are ways in which, because of your mindset, you can go 10 times further. But if you limit yourself, you've already lost.
Yeah. And on that note, letting Sophia in. One second. Okay, she's just joining now. Perfect.
Hi.
Hey, Sophia, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Sorry for panicking before. I just wasn't sure how am I meant to join.
Oh no, it was my bad. I forgot to send you the link, so that's all on me.
No, it's fine. It's okay.
Awesome. So how can we help you today, Sophia, with your CV?
So I'm currently a second year gym studies student, and I'm interested in going into banking. A few weeks ago, I did 2 internships, not internships, spring weeks, sorry. And I'm hoping to apply after my exams finish in a few days to summer internships. So I was just wondering how could I make my CV stand out, because I feel sometimes it's because I do have a bit of experience, but I feel it's not as good as it could be. And I'm also interested in consulting, but I haven't really got any experience, so I wanted to look into that over the summer.
Awesome. Quick question. Is there a process by which you are being fast tracked, for example, to an assessment center for the summer internship from your springs or anything like that?
Yeah, so one of them, we had to do a video interview, and then I've gone to the final round interview, which is happening in a few weeks. I think that'll probably be online. And then the other one, I'm fast tracked to an assessment center that's going to happen after summer when we're able to travel.
Yeah, hopefully. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll get your CV up now.
Okay, thank you.
As and you guys have an opportunity to kind of explore Sophia's CV. One thing I say is, if you're doing a lot of applications, it is something you really want to do. I would personally have a very systematic approach to applying. So, yeah. I don't know if I have any examples, but I had a big spreadsheet of all the firms I wanted to apply to. Kind of a list of them, a prioritization of which ones I really want to do the most, and systematically trying to go through as many as possible, because with a lot of the banking roles, as I said before, it's on a rolling basis. So it's whoever gets there first, whoever gets their foot in the door. So a lot of those firms, you want to be hitting it within the first, maybe literally month of when they open. Don't look at the closing dates for a good justification as to when you should be doing it. It's within a month of the opening date.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, completely agreed with Amir there. So a couple of quick things that we can pick up on really quickly. So firstly, I do like the structure of your CV. It's not all bunched together. It's clearly differentiated, all of that. The first thing I'd say is, given that you've done virtual spring weeks, it's actually quite difficult for you to quantify your achievements within those, because you can't really say stuff like I increased revenue in something by 30%, or that you increased memberships or anything like that. So I think it's very, very important, in order to help yourself stand out right now, that you draw attention to all of the personal projects that you have been doing yourself, or any university positions you have been working on, because those are definitely things that you can quantify, and that show off your personal brand as well. So I would definitely be, I would personally probably speak about your role as treasurer at the German Society. and have like a little dedicated part to that and talk about how you handle the budgeting or like the financial forecasting, like the membership fees, for example. Like, were you able to like increase the membership fees or like the overall revenues generated from the society? Were you able to allocate resources in like an effective way, and all that kind of stuff, in terms of like events and stuff as well. So that'll be the first piece of advice I'd give.
Yeah, I just want to. So I interrupted you.
Yep. One last piece of advice before I hand over to Amir is we're so close right now to getting this whole CV on one page. I reckon let's try and get it all onto one page, just for that clean look for the employer. Sorry, Amir?
Yeah. A couple of quick things. First of all, I'd send CVs as PDF documents very quickly. Second thing I'd say is that, as I mentioned, there are certain things which will make you seem as if a good enough candidate. So having virtual internships means that you're interested, it proves you're doing it. It will never mean that you're a really good candidate though, because it's very hard for a virtual internship to really differentiate yourself. So stuff like the Treasure of Warwick Society, the Warwick German Society, really good focus on that. Your experience, was it ice skating? Was it figure skating?
Yeah, I was an international figure skater for like 13 years. I'm not sure like if I should make like a bigger deal of that, because I only mentioned like 2 achievements.
So if there's any way
more
in which you can spin that to make it more leadership, like if you did training for people below you, you were, delivering training sessions at an international level, people often don't realize like how impressive they can make their achievement sound. And they think, oh, I just did this. If you were, training at an Olympic level, or you were training others, or that is so impressive, right? The dedication, the organization, the logistical stuff you have to organize in that. I would focus on that, because if I see that, I'm like, whoa, this Sophia is amazing. She's done so much, where the immediate reaction when someone sees that is phenomenal. So I would focus on that and find ways to spin little things that is not you're lying, but it's like you're twisting it in a clever way, right? Like highlighting certain aspects, like the training angle and the international angle. If you're treasurer, like, talk about the achievements that you had, as I mentioned, and any of, if you increase membership, if you increase the fees, the forecasting, anything which is like plausible that a treasurer might do. Or if you organize a tour, for example, and you did the forecasting for that, anything like that, like if you can spin that in a way which makes you particularly sound impressive or something you've done, like go for it. Please go for it.
Yeah.
One last thing I'd add is what you want to do as much as possible within the CV, right, is talk about the value that you add and like quantifying that. And that's difficult to do here because, a lot of it is virtual, right? We understand that. But the next best thing for you to do is to talk about how your work within that specific spring internship makes you a good candidate for future internships, if that makes sense. Yeah. So when you go line by line through this and you think about, how does this make me a better candidate? You'll find places within which you're being very, very generic or vague. And those are the places within which you want to be very specific about, what work you did and how that improved your skills, for example. So, for example, here, when you say, I was able to gain a deeper insight into how the firm operates and available opportunities, that's really generic. But if you talk more about, specific business functions and how your understanding of those business functions increased, or, like you gained a better understanding of like valuation of like different opportunities or companies, for example, that seems much more like the kind of skill that a future internship might look for in someone. So one thing I'd suggest is have a look at the kind of roles that you're interested in applying for on, like, even if you just search it in LinkedIn, right? Have a look through, the keywords that they're looking for there and try and get as many of those keywords as possible integrated into some of your experiences within your virtual.
The other thing I'd add is, okay, you've got, so the summer internship is likely open in maybe early September. It's currently end of June. Your exams finish in a couple of days. You've got a month to 6 weeks to do a really cool side project, which you can put right at the top of your CV. Call it work experience and leadership. Do a really awesome side project. Guys, if you are listening right now and you want to do something with Sophia, message her, we'll put the details down. Find people on LinkedIn, do a cool side project, find people from your uni. Maybe it's a coronavirus relief, something like that. Maybe it's like a charity. Maybe it's a fundraiser. Maybe it's a startup. Maybe it's an app design. Maybe it's a report or a project. Find something that you think is going to sound impressive and go ahead and do it in these next 4 weeks you have. Put that right at the top of your work experience and leadership, and they'll see that like, wow, she's done so much. maybe even say that, at the end of it, you did some networking and you use that to form a group that, that became, the one you're working with now, or something like that, right? Like, think what could be really impressive and just go and do it.
Okay.
And I think on top of that, like, that's going to be the differentiator. Like, the employer's going to go, wow, I love that she took initiative to do that. Then they're going to see, okay, she's also got loads of experience. And that's when they hire you into a top firm. Whereas I would never think that, because even if you had like 5 spring weeks, for example, that would improve the likelihood of you getting hired just from your CV. It will definitely improve the likelihood of you converting your offers. No doubt about it. But yeah, like, always think about, the personal stuff the stuff that is specific and personal to you within which you show development in. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. That was really useful.
No worries. You've got an incredibly large amount of potential. I know you're going to do very, very well. So
thank you very much.
I hope everything goes well. And yeah, see you soon.
Thank you. Bye. Have a great evening.
You too. Take care.
And you.
All right. Thank you everyone for tuning in. That's just the end of our show. If you want to be on the show next week, please send us a DM right now, and then we'll hopefully get back to you as soon as possible. If I haven't got back to you, I'm really, really sorry. I'm trying to get back to all of them. It's been a lot. But yeah, if you want to be on the show, please send us a message and tell us what you want to talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Make sure you subscribe. Have a great weekend.